Hello, everyone, and welcome to our final keynote of day one of Thrive, United for Democracy and Global Action. I am thrilled to be moderating this keynote where the presenter is a fabulous human, a dear friend of mine, and an expert in Ubuntu pedagogy. So you all are in for quite a treat today. Let me share a little bit more about her before she begins. Dr. Alicia Blackwood is an assistant professor of education at Longwood University in Virginia. She teaches literacy, behavior management, and human development courses, as well as leadership around culturally responsive teaching, early literacy, instructional design, and AI integration in education. She is amazing. She has over 25 years of experience in education, spanning across K-12, higher ed, and community contexts. She was a 2017 Fulbright Hays Scholar in Namibia and Botswana, and is the author of Ubuntu Pedagogy, Becoming a Responsive Ubuntu Educator, which reflects her expertise in Ubuntu-informed, culturally responsive pedagogy. We are going to begin today with a talk from Dr. Alicia Blackwood, and then she and I will enter into some discussion and conversation together on the topic and take comments and questions as well from you all in the audience. We are thrilled that you are here to join us live, and if you are watching the recording, know that we see you as well, and we are glad that you are here with us in whatever time zone it is on the planet. With that, I'm going to turn over to Dr. Alicia Blackwood.
All right, thank you so much, Nancy. So today the title is We Rise Together Through Ubuntu, a framework for democratic resilience. Imagine being the president of the most diverse, opinionated, unpredictable group of citizens you could ever fit in one room. I was the CEO of that society. I wore many hats: instructional designer, counselor, coach. That community was my classroom. As a former elementary classroom teacher, I did not lead through control. I led through democratic practices. We had a mission, we had shared vision, we co-created norms, we had procedures, we set expectations, and every morning we gathered, not simply to begin instructions, but to build a sense of community. We celebrated one another. We solved problems together. We voiced grievances, and we learned how to disagree without dehumanizing one another. We practice love. We practice responsibility. Those children were not just students. They were citizen leaders in formation. And often, as their teacher, I stepped into the learner's stance because leadership in a democratic space requires humility. You see, the classroom teaches many lessons. I learned early that leadership does not mean domination. True leadership builds the capacity in others rather than controlling them. With that belief in mind, I intentionally cultivate learning spaces where every students were seen, valued, and felt that sense of community and that sense of belonging in the classroom. So one day, a professor who researched and studied in South Africa observed my classroom, and he left a note on my desk. You teach in the spirit of Ubuntu. I had never heard that word before. And so I wondered to myself, what did he see? What were some of the things that we were doing in the classroom? And so this statement It's changed my life. I began documenting my teaching. I engaged in self study. I reflected on the relationships, the decision making processes, the communications with the families, the communications with my students, the interactions, and how they care for each other. Soon after, I had the opportunity to travel to Southern Africa as a US Fulbright scholar. I lived in the communities in Namibia and Botswana. I observed life not from a textbook, but from the people in the communities. And there I learned the deeper meaning of Ubuntu. You see, Ubuntu to me is a noun and a verb. The concept comes from the Bantu languages of Africa. A noun, it names the philosophy. It speaks to the very essence of our shared humanity, our interconnectedness. It is captured in the powerful aphorism, I am because we are. I do not exist by myself. I am here today because of all of you. Ubuntu teaches us that well-being, that my well-being is bound to yours. If I am hurting and if you are hurting, I am hurting. And if one is broken, the collective is broken. Ubuntu is Africa's gift to the world. Ubuntu is more than a belief, it is a practice. And I also say Ubuntu is a verb. It is not only something we believe, it is something we do. Ubuntu, to have Ubuntu is to act in ways that protect dignity, restore relationships, and strengthens the collective. It is choosing compassion over indifference. It is practicing accountability. It is refusing to dehumanize even when harm has occurred. It is building systems, classroom communities, and technologies that affirmed our humanity. I have also learned from the elders that Ubuntu does not erase the individual, it honors the individual. Because when the individual is healed, valued, and whole, the community and the nation thrive. It is through deep reflection I realized that. And I also realized that my classroom was a living ecosystem of Ubuntu, a democratic micro society where respect, care, and responsibility and our collective success were embedded in the daily practices. And it is in that realization I came to a deeper understanding of democracy. It is not just a political system, it's a human one. So we must remember the word democracy, it comes from two ancient roots. Demos, meaning the people, and kratos, meaning power. Democracy at the core is the power of the people, not the power of institutions alone, not the power of a few voices, but the collective power of community that cares, participate, listens, and take responsibility for one another. Not through rules alone, but through the relationships that we cultivate. And if you were listening to Doctors Gorner's in the morning keynote, they talk about this. Relationships are key. And it's that realization that led me to further understand, and have a deeper connection to democracy. We must remember that when we think even about South Africa, it was the collective voices of the people grounded in Ubuntu that dismantled the terror of apartheid in South Africa. Leaders such as Nelson Mandela, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, they drew upon this philosophy, not just to lead, but to restore a broken nation. And as Archbishop Desmond Tutu always remind us, my humanity is tied to yours. And this truth was echoed in 1963 when the Ethiopian leader Haile Selassie addressed the United Nations. The words he spoke was later carried across the globe by the reggae artist Bob Marley in the song War. He warned us that until the philosophy that holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, there will be war. And without this shift, our interconnectedness, our democracy will remain fragile, and our peace remains out of reach. Today, when we look at our global struggles, yes, polarization, dehumanization, exclusion, supremacy, we are witnessing what happens when interconnectedness is forgotten. Ubuntu challenges us that the belief that one group must rise by another falling, it's not supposed to be that way. Ubuntu insists that democracy is not simple a system of voting. It is a system of caring. It is a system of listening. It is a system of collective responsibility. True democratic resilience does not come from laws alone. It comes from the people who see another as fully human. Ubuntu offers a global framework that is rooted in dignity, generosity, cooperation, and balance. These words on the screen is showing us Ubuntu is expressed in cultures across the globe. And within those cultures, they have a word for Ubuntu. You see, diversity does not threaten unity, it strengthens it. We do not have to agree to belong. We do not have to share the same values to care for others. From classrooms to communities, from nations to global systems, Ubuntu becomes a blueprint for resilience. Democracy survives when people feel seen. It thrives when people feel connected. It endures when people take responsibility for one another. So today, I offer you Ubuntu, not just as a philosophy, but as a call to humanize education, a call to humanize leadership, a call to humanize democracy itself. Because when we rise together, we build systems that last. I am because we are. And together, through Ubuntu, we can build resilient democracies across cultures and nations and for generations to come. Thank you.
Alicia, those are powerful words. I want to start this next segment by giving those who are here with us and those who are watching the recording a moment to reflect. And I invite all of you to share in the chat a word, a phrase, what is coming to mind right now as you are hearing these powerful words from Alicia about what democracy should be, what it can be, and how this spirit of Ubuntu can lead us to that. So take a moment and reflect and go ahead and share those words and those phrases in the chat. Mm. See, answers starting to come in.
And I love the silence. One of the principles I go by is to respect silence. Because within that silence, we are able to process.
Yes. So beautiful. Alicia, as you see these words and these responses coming in, what are you thinking?
So I wasn't able to see the chat.
On the right-hand side of our screen, click where it says comments and it will switch.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So yes, and take a moment as well to read them. We encourage you all who are here to read through some of the comments that have been shared here. I'll read a few for those of you who are watching the recording as well. How have we gotten away from this here in the US? Powerful truth. Everything is connected, everything is interdependent, so everything is vulnerable. And that's why this has to be more than whole of government and more than whole of nation. It really has to be a global effort, a quote by Jen Easterly, director of the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency. Why do some people not share this philosophy? Grateful reminder of what we truly can be across the globe. Unity, remembering, collective heart, interdependence, finding your people, love, shalom, beautiful. Love the connection with the word solidarity. The spirit of Ubuntu is a hope for the future of democracy. Unity and authoritative compassion.
Yes.
As you hear those, Alicia, what do you think?
I think it speaks to just our essence of our shared humanity. It doesn't matter what part of the globe you are, that human connection. And Ubuntu is expressed in cultures, in indigenous culture all over the globe. And so we don't have to call it Ubuntu. We could call it what is expressed in our culture. We can call it as simple words that we have here in the chat. And so it is that interconnectedness that helps us to remember when we see the person out there on the street or I'm at the university today, and the janitors are coming through. You want to make sure that you see them and validate it. Those are the simple things that we start with.
And
Yes.
you and I have spoken many times over the last couple years about what it means to treat people with dignity, to treat people in this spirit that we are connected. And you mentioned just now the janitors. I know this is one of the things you and I have spoken about. We
Yes.
talk about those in our community who can seem invisible.
Yes.
What are some practical ways, and what are some of those others who are sometimes considered invisible, but we must see because we are all connected? We can't just go around thinking only the people on the stage matter, only the people in the seats matter. It is every person who makes this event, those you never see, right? But every person who makes our world work. And so many are invisible. As you talk about that spirit of Ubuntu, how can we make sure that they feel seen? And how can we make sure that we see those who are typically invisible?
And that's a great point. That's a great point, Nancy. And it starts with us. The small things that we can do. We don't have to wait for macro systems to do things. It starts with us doing the small things. And I also remember when I was in Southern Africa, especially when I was in South Africa, they would greet the students at the school, Sawubona. And what that is saying, that greeting is saying, is that I see you. I welcome you into this space. It's not just like, hi, good morning, but it's really being intentional to say, I see you. The janitor just came and removed my trash. Acknowledging that. I wasn't able to speak, but just a nod is to acknowledge, to thank them. When you see others, acknowledge them, validate them, affirm them. We have functions here at the university, and the individuals from the food services are normally the ones that are the unseen at the university. And so I make sure it starts with me, is to acknowledge them, to, thank them for the things that they're doing to keep our systems moving. And so I would say it starts with you, the people, the voices of the people. It starts with the individual.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I was first starting out my teaching career, one of the most important people in my life was a woman, Maria. She was a cafeteria worker, and she was the one who gave me the resilience to keep going as a first-year teacher. It was the way she checked on me, even, and we can make those people invisible. She had such a huge impact on me, on the way she loved and on the way she loved children. And for many, right, that might have been their only meal. She was such a source of joy and love. And sometimes we think, when we talk about stakeholders in education, in democracy, we often forget these very important people in those conversations. In education, we talk very often about leaders, teachers, parents, students, and we forget all the other people who are such a rich part of that community, including those who are the neighbors to the physical school, right? We have to think of community in this broader way. And I love that you, in your work, brings that to the forefront. Are there other practical actions that you could recommend to us as we, think about acting in that way? So one is, we've now said, to make sure we truly see and validate those around us. What are other things that we can do?
I think it's also, after you see others, is to make sure that we're building authentic relationships. Building authentic relationships in our business, in our school environments, in our community. Starting there in building those relationships, because when we're able to build relationships, it takes our interconnectedness, it takes those opportunities for us to see others and to operate from this place of care. when we're building these relationships. And it also helps in the next layer for individuals to feel that sense of belonging. Whether you're in a corporate office or you're in a school building or you're in a medical facility, you want to make sure that you're intentional about building those relationships and operating from a place of genuine care, operating from a place of love. And if you notice what I'm talking, I'm starting with the individual. Because when we talk about democracy, we're looking at the larger systems and we're trying to change the larger systems. But if we want to have change, we start with us. We start to deeply reflect on the actions that we can do on a daily basis.
As you're speaking about the authentic relationships, it makes me think of something you said in the talk, which was, we do not have to agree to belong. That is such a powerful statement by itself. And I think, given some of the struggles you mentioned, like polarization, that is one that is often hard for us to figure out how we overcome those disagreements and find that connection. What advice do you have for us in this moment?
I think it starts with our civic education. And I'm not talking about fluff. I'm talking about intentional with our civic education. Here at my university, and I think we are only one in the US that has a program like this. It's called the Civite program. And all of our undergraduate students have to go through a coursework that helps to cultivate that citizen leader. Because we can talk about it, but we have to be about it. We have to show our students, we have to make sure that we are connecting them with community for them to understand that civic engagement, what it looks like, what it sounds like. Because sometimes we can operate from that place of just blame, but we are not intentional in our structures and being systematic in our approaches in making sure that we are cultivating leaders and teaching them what it looks like. And that is something that in my time, living outside of the US, I see that in other school systems outside of the US, that they're intentional in teaching you how to be a good human being. It's as simple as that. And be intentional in developing that, and not just when we have problems, we're trying to go to restorative justice, but we want to start in cultivating from as early as pre-K and all the way to their tertiary education level. Yes.
Yeah. In the Montessori environment, which I do a lot of work with, and I serve as a technology leader for Mi Escuela Montessori in Florida, which is free, bilingual, public Montessori. It's an incredibly diverse community, but we have an emphasis in the Montessori approach on social justice and on inclusion. But one of the things that it immediately makes me think of as you're talking is the Peace Corner. And that from a young age, children are taught both to have intentional strategies for finding peace and calming themselves, but also they are intentionally taught strategies for conflict resolution. There are things like the Peace Rose, and there's a book that goes with it. They hold it, they come together, discuss what's wrong. They learn to apologize and say they're sorry. They learn to receive and to forgive. These are really powerful practices. And I think sometimes when we talk about civic education, we're taught, people think that's civics. And that just means learn the way the government works in your country, right? Or how do you vote? How does a bill become a law? That was the big one here in the US. Some of you all may remember a Schoolhouse Rock video that goes with that one. But there's so much more to civic education. And these other pieces of self-regulation, of conflict resolution, are often left out of that work, right? These bigger goals.
And that is beautiful. You said that. I was initially trained as a Montessori teacher as well. And so when I shift over to public school, I brought a lot of those principles with me in the way that I structure my learning spaces. And so I share the story of the professor who researched and studied in South Africa. You know, folks have named my space, oh, that's the Zen classroom. But to your point, those are the things that I was doing in the classroom. I just didn't have a name on the things that I was doing to cultivate a place where the students are feeling that sense of belonging and creating. I had a space in my class that I also called the safe space, where this wasn't a timeout zone. The students, if they just need a moment to reset, you know, that self-regulation, they can just go to that space and reset with multiple things that I had there for the students. And so when we think about, you know, the space and Ubuntu, I also labeled that space later in that classroom. I labeled it the Ubuntu reflective corner, because when we started to deconstruct Ubuntu, and that's what I did in my book, because I really wanted, from someone born in the West, I wanted to really understand it in depth and to be able to see the aspect of it in my school environment, in my society, living here in the US. And that's what I was doing. I was deconstructing it, what it looks like, what it sounds like. And some of the things that I was doing is to making sure that we are affirming and validating all of the students that are coming into our spaces. We have to create those spaces where they feel connected and ready for that learning. And so love and respect, we don't talk a lot about those in education, but we have to make sure that we're intentional about teaching students about love, teaching students about respect. And something I did, that I was a peace and justice trained facilitator in Florida. I went through the Peace and Justice Institute, and the Peace and Justice Institute had these 13 principles that is actually coming from the work of Parker Palmer, the 13 principles of how we treat each other. And so those principles, I still use them today in the university level, because I don't have to share the same values with you to make sure that I am showing you love and I'm respectful of you. And so those principles are like listening deeply. When things get difficult, turn to wonder, suspend judgment, create a hospitable and accountable community. And so I use those principles in all the classrooms that I have been from, K-12 all the way to higher education. I center these principles as my norms. And so creating norms of how we are going to operate in these diverse spaces. How are we going to engage in dialogue, in crucial conversations, and operate from a place of radical compassion? Yes.
Yes. Oh, you mentioned just now in those principles, approaching things with wonder and suspending judgment. And so often, I think we see news or we see posts, especially the comments out on news stories and social media, and our bodies turn to fear and rage. That's the natural human response. We have to be intentional. And you have spoken about how Ubuntu, coming with this Ubuntu approach, can help us to be more resilient, right? That we won't just fall into the rage. We won't just fall into dehumanizing when we disagree, but we can come with wonder, with curiosity. We can suspend judgment and seek to understand. How do you see in the bigger picture this Ubuntu philosophy building resilience in all of those who are here and taking us, forward as we try to sustain democracies worldwide?
The work we engage in as activists, as global citizens that wants to see change, it is a heavy work and it can be very toxic on our bodies. And especially in the age of Gen AI, where so many images and texts and fake news and deep fakes are out there, I invite individuals to pause. And in that pause moment, to make sure that we're operating from this critical space. Because the things that come at us at the news at times, it can really disrupt our entire body's function. It lowers our immune system. And so there are things that I do. I was watching an individual, I'm not going to say his name right now, but I was watching him on the news. And my fiance said to me, like, why are you sitting and listening to that individual? And I said, I am processing because I turned to wonder. That's one of the 13 principles. I wonder what brought this individual to this space. I wonder how this individual is so disconnected from humanity. And so those are the processes that I go through because I know that when you're just operating from a fear, we cannot do this righteous work that we need to go out there and do because then it impacts us. We're releasing cortisols in our bodies and we're poisoning ourselves. So we have to operate from this place of radical compassion. I'm not telling you to say Ubuntu is to, turn the other cheek and that, but you have to have an action plan. You have to be able to think because when we're operating from a place of emotions, we cannot think straight. And then we just become we just become reactionary. And I really like the statement that former First Lady Michelle Obama talked about, and a lot of times that statement is misquoted. But when she talks about the phrase, when they go low, we go high, that was about us, for you as the individual, so that you can build that resilience in yourself, so that you do not stoop to where they are, the things that they are doing to diminish others. You're not doing that because if we go low with them, how are we going to know the difference? So
Yeah.
it's so important that we are elevating ourselves, and that takes work. That takes intentional work. So when we talk about nonviolence work and you really study the folks who really put nonviolence work in action, it's a lot of that work starts with yourself first. Yes.
Let's go a little further on that work on ourself and the radical compassion, because I think probably all of us sitting here right now can think of times where we have done this well in the last decade, especially, and times where we have failed. And radical compassion, when we hear that, we sometimes think that means just for others, that we should be radically compassionate to others, but giving ourselves grace and compassion is also needed to get through this time. How can we love ourselves and show Ubuntu, that we are, that, like you said, the individual still matters in this, right? And we are also one individual that needs that compassion and grace. How do we, when we mess up, when we don't act from our best or higher selves, what can we do? How do we turn that around?
I think it starts with this idea of granting yourself grace and making sure that you are deeply reflecting and you're starting from that place of recognition in understanding what you have done and how you have showed up in the space.
Mm.
And it comes to this, the other level of it is for you to go through that process for yourself, whether you are journaling, whether you are taking moments of deep reflecting, whether if you're engaging in a conversation with an elder, whatever that process is for us, you have to find the one that works for you.
Mm.
Because our goal, and I talk about, this idea of radical compassion, it's not just extending to others, it is extending it to ourselves as well. It is also making sure that we can do that work on self so that we can know how to communicate. And when we operate from that place of radical compassion, it does not say to us to avoid injustice, but we are preparing ourselves in how we confront it while preserving our human dignity.
Yes. Now, you know that dignity is at the heart of all of my work, that I call my work dignity-driven pedagogy. And that is part of why the every single stakeholder matters is at the core of how I work in education. Um, but I think especially now, and you mentioned generative AI a little while ago, right? It's getting messier. I think we hear this word dignity, or we hear a phrase human centered, or we hear interconnect. We hear these words, and sometimes it's hard to know what that should mean. When you specifically are talking about human dignity, when you're talking about treating people with dignity, what does that in itself mean to you?
So, when you're treating people with dignity, and going back to the earlier part of the conversation, we start with seeing individuals, validating them, affirming the individuals in the space. And when we when you think about it, it also branches out into society. You move through different levels of your dignity as well. And it gives you a framework to operate from. So if you're also thinking about using technology, we know that AI has its potential benefits and it has its risk and it is deeply problematic. And so operating from an ethical standpoint and asking questions is how is this benefiting myself and others? What impact it is having? And so one of my other colleague on my research team, Janice Mack, she also talked about this principled innovation,
Yeah.
that we want to bring that into our decision making process. So even as the individual interacting with the technologies, we also want to make sure that we are starting from that place that we are being reflected, because that branches out.
I think that's so important. I think many of us who are here at this conference, you know, we care about maintaining democracy, but we are trying to transform and create new systems, create new processes, create, you know, new ways of being, new technologies to support society, and technologies that will help. I often uh, remind myself and others that we are in the middle of the story and we do not know fully how things will impact us in the end, or how things will work out. Um, but I'm grateful that you talked about how we can center these beliefs as we are creating something new, that should be happening as we innovate, as we plan, as we conceive of that transformation. And when I think of that dignity piece, it's that inherent value. So I ask myself that question: does this technology respect the inherent value of the humans? Does it respect the inherent value of children, of human creativity, and very specifically to this, of human connection, the value of human connection. Are these technologies, are these systems, are these policies, are these laws, are they actually respecting the inherent value of humanity and our connectedness, not just to each other, but to the world, to the environment, right?
Yes.
The entire system working together. And so I think those are really important questions for us to be asking as we continue to go through this conference, as we continue to, leave. I hope we all make true human connections during these 2 days that turn into future work and innovation, where we take these principles at the heart of what we're doing moving forward. We have just a couple minutes left. I want to turn back to you, Alicia, to share any additional resources you would like to mention for them to continue to learn on this topic, as well as final thoughts.
Yes, thank you. And one of the things I was going to make a connection to what you were saying is having that human centric approach, even from the policies down to how we operate as we think through our approaches with these new technologies that are disrupting our environment and our ecosystem. And so, one of the things that I wanted to recommend that there were two books that really helped me in on my journey of doing this work on self and having this deeper understanding of radical compassion as we are out there doing the work. And one of the first book is the Book of Forgiven by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. If you haven't read that book, I would encourage every individual to read that book, the Book of Forgiven. And then the second book was the Book of Joy. The Book of Joy, it's with Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the 14 Dalai Lama, and it was written by Douglas Abrams. And I think the conversations, and at the end of that book, the Book of Joy, it gives us strategies and techniques that we can do to create peace within ourselves and connecting with our community, and so that you are at a place that you're ready to do this work, because this work, it demands a lot of from us, and the voices of the people are important. We see that the voices of the people from time and time as make and create tremendous changes in society. So I do not encourage people to be silent. Is that we need to make sure that we're preparing ourselves to do this work. And when we return from the battlefield, we want to go through our strategies so that we can heal ourselves. Because if we are broken, our community will be broken and our nation will be broken. So thank you.
Dr. Alicia Blackwood, thank you so much on behalf of the Thrive Committee, on behalf of the Thrive community, for being here, for taking your time and your energy and sharing them with us, to share your wisdom and your experience with us. I am so grateful to have had the honor of sharing this time with you and continue to be inspired by your work all of the time. Thank you to all of you who have joined us. Oh, Alicia, you want to say something?
I didn't mention my book, Ubuntu Pedagogy, too. So that is a book that is out there that you can also get and read as well. So thank you so much. And I just want to just say, a big shout out to the team that is behind the scenes that is doing this work. I have been gaining so much all morning, just involved in the process and going to sessions. So thank you so much. And thank you for all of you. Thank you, Lucy, for the work that you're doing and your team. Thank you so much. We're doing this good work. So keep on keeping on. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And I will tell you, we were one step ahead of you. We keep shouting out your book in the chat.
Okay.
So we will not be missing that one. For those of you, if you haven't checked it out yet, I have been reading it. It is wonderful. And it has so much of Alicia's story in it. And it's a beautiful read, an inspiring read. So I hope you all will check that out. And with that, we will move on to our next sessions. Thank you all so much for joining us for this keynote. I hope that you won't tune out, because in the next session at 10 minutes from now, I will have a session on everyday advocacy that works. So if you want to put these principles into action in very practical ways to advocate for the things and people you care about, come on and join me. And we hope that you have an absolute wonderful, wonderful rest of your conference. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you,
Again,
Nancy.
Alicia.
Thank you.